Hello everyone, I once again welcome you all to editorial analysis of Shankar IAS Academy. Today's date is 10th of January 2025. Displayed here are the list of articles that we are going to discuss today from the mains perspective. In this first article, we'll be discussing about a new judgment given by our Supreme Court with respect to persons with disabilities, in short called as PWD. And in the second article, we'll be discussing about India and Afghanistan's relationship when it comes to bilateral level. So without any delay, let us get into the first news article discussion. Now look at this news article that talks about a recent judgment given by our Supreme Court regarding the Rajiv Ratturi versus Union of India. So let us revise the key points from the article from the mains perspective. Before that, I have a mains question for you. Let me read out the question. Examine the role of technology in empowering persons with disabilities. How can India leverage assistive technologies to achieve universal accessibility? So it is actually a 15-marker question for 250 words. You can write an answer and post it in the comment section so that we can review your answer. So let's start with what is this case is about. See, this Rajiv Ratturi versus Union of India case actually challenges rule number 15 of Rights to Persons of Disability 2017. See, here one important thing that you have to note that is that if there is an act, the act just gives the framework of how a particular thing is going to be enforced. But the executives, they will be making the rules, and these rules actually describes the procedural implementation of a particular thing. So this is how in 2016 the Rights to Persons with Disability Act was enacted. For this act, they have made this rules in 2017. So the contradicting rule is this rule number 15. What does this rule number 15 says? This rule number 15 says authorities can have the discretion to implement a particular accessibility rule or not. Or in other words, we can tell that if a project is being built and if a particular ministry is involved in that, the particular ministry can decide whether the accessibility guidelines that has been given for the persons with disability can be applied to that particular building or not. So this is what the rule number 15 actually says. So through this case, rule number 15 of RPW rules has been challenged because it actually violates the Act's vision. So the Act mandates that the departments, they have to strictly mandatorily implement the guidelines, but the rules says that the authorities have the discretion to implement it or not. So since the act and rules are a bit contradictory, it has led to a case, and currently our Supreme Court has given a green signal saying that it actually violates the rights of persons with disability. So this is what the overview of this particular case. Now the court has made certain observations. Let us see them one by one. So the first observation is that the discretionary nature of rule 15, it is very contradictory, especially to section 40, 44, 45, 46 and section 89 of RPwD Act 2016. So all these sections are nothing but the provisions that give access to persons with disability to transportation, to internet, or to the government buildings and etc. So the first observation made is that it is discretionary in nature. Now the second observation made is that the fragmented guidelines. So as I said earlier, there is a actual contradiction between the rules and the act. So the accessibility standards actually exist, but they lack enforceability across the sectors, for example the housing, transportation and etc. Now this is the second important observation made. So the third important observation made is there is a presence of minimum standards. So we require a mandatory universal access. So we need a mandatory universal accessibility standards. So these are all the key observations of the court. Now talking about the broader implication of the judgment, the court has said that we have to move from fragmented guidelines to principle based, especially the universal framework, and we have to emphasize on intersectionality in accessibility. So we should not be hindering any person when it comes to even designing a particular project. Now, apart from this, there are certain challenges with existing accessibility rules. Let us see them one by one. So, the first one is the immediate compliance focus. See, there is a prioritize. See, the policymakers, they prioritize minimum threshold over long-term vision, which is a very harmful thing when it comes to accessibility issue. Now, the second important challenge is the lack of universal designs. There is inadequate or insufficient consideration for even the elderly and vulnerable groups. Here, by the term fragmented approach, it means that the policy are not taking consideration of the accessibility issue in the first place. So, these are the three challenges that are remaining with the existing accessibility rules. Now, let us quickly go through the very good international practice that has been set as an example. A very good example is the Canada's accessibility roadmap. So, this policy framework, it is a comprehensive policy framework that gives inclusivity to all the people, and it tries to achieve the accessibility by 2040. So you can just quote this as an example in your mains answer writing. And this accessibility roadmap is actually a sliding scale model, meaning with the changing variability, with the changing time, it can actually evolve. So you can so this is a very important thing that you can note. Now, moving on, so far we have seen about the judgment given, and we saw what are all the challenges in the existing rules. Now, let us see what are all the recommendations that can be taken in order to solve this particular issue. So, the first thing is we have to bring in the universal and digital accessibility, especially we have to integrate the digital and physical accessibility standards. This will ease the standard of living and bring in a lot of inclusivity. Now, the second important thing is we have to address the attitudinal barriers as well. This can be done by overcoming the societal biases against inclusivity, and for this we can actually bring in a lot of awareness. We can bring in a lot of campaigns especially. So this will normalize or sensitize the population and reduce the attitudinal barrier. Now, the third important thing that you have to remember is that we should have a centralized oversight, and this can be done by Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. They can lead or they can oversee any kind of implementation, whether that guideline has been implemented or not. And now finally we have to get feedbacks from the persons with disabilities, and this will help us in policy making to gain the maximum output. So, having seen the recommendations, now let us quickly go through the legal and policy frameworks for PWDs in India. See, the first important act is, we saw just now, RPwD Act 2016. So, it recognizes 21 disabilities and it reserves 4% of job for all the PWD persons. And it actually brings or mandates for a penalty for non-compliance with standards that has been prescribed in this particular act. Now, the second important campaign is this Accessible India campaign, which held in 2015. So it aims to make a public infrastructure by integrating the ICT, that is the information and technology, and making transport systems even more accessible. And finally, we have the National Policy for PWDs. This was enacted in 2006. This particular policy actually gives the guidelines and prescribes for a equal opportunity, right protection, and full PWD participation. So all these legal and policy frameworks provides for a dignified life for persons with disabilities. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this article. This article talks about India and Afghanistan's relationship, especially the bilateral relation. And currently it is in news because India's foreign secretary has actually met the Afghanistan's active foreign minister. And that is why this article is very important from the mains perspective. So let us revise the important facts alone in this article discussion. Before that, I have a mains question for you. Let me read out the question. Discuss India's role in addressing the Afghan refugee crisis and its efforts to balance humanitarian aid with strategic interest. So it is a 10-marker question. You can write an answer for 150 words and you can post it in the comment section so that we can review your answer. So with this, let us start where actually Afghanistan is located. So it is actually a landlocked country in South Central Asia, and it has borders with Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Pakistan, Iran, and China. So the capital of Afghanistan is Kabul. Talking about India and Afghanistan relationship, India and Afghanistan has already signed a strategic partnership agreement in 2011, for which they will be sharing all the knowledge reserves with among themselves for security, trade, as well as development. And we have invested a lot of money into Afghanistan. For example, we have funded a lot of developmental projects. Over $3 billion in investment we have done with Afghanistan. A very good example for such kind of investment is the Afghanistan Parliament, as well as the Salma Dam. And then we have regional connectivity with Afghanistan, especially through the Chabahar port and the international north-south transit corridor. So both the connectivity, we actually bypass Pakistan by using both the connectivity through Afghanistan. And when we talk about the security cooperation, we have invested a lot when it comes to training and capacity building for Afghan forces. And finally, the cultural diplomacy, we have repaired or we have rehabilitated a lot of Buddhist temples. For example, the Bamiyan Buddha restoration, as well as we have provided a lot of scholarships for the Afghan students. So these are all certain bilateral relationship highlights that you have to remember when it comes to India and Afghanistan. Now moving on, let us quickly go through the security challenges that currently both the countries face. The first important issue is the counter-terrorism measures. So India has been training the Afghan forces and equipping the Afghan forces, and even we have intelligence sharing. However, counter-terrorism is actually a area of concern where we have to cooperate even more a lot. And the second most concerning challenge is the regional instability. We have already conducted a lot of high level meetings to ensure that the Afghan territory is not misused. And talking about the Chabahar port, as I said earlier, it bypasses Pakistan for trade and aid, as well as it provides for trade enhancement, and it expands trade route as well as regional trade hub. Now, moving on to the India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan triangle. See, the first issue is the 1893's Durand line issue. See, this Durand line is nothing but a contentious border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Here you can see the Durand line in the red color. So this line actually is very important because it demarcates the countries, right? So it has a lot of implication when it comes to regional security as well as India's engagement with that particular country. And the second important thing that you have to remember is India is actually helping a lot through the humanitarian aid as well as the developmental project. So this is countering Pakistan's influence in the particular region. So this is what we call when it comes to India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan triangle. Let us quickly go through the solutions that can be taken when it comes to India and Afghanistan relationship. See, the first thing is strengthening the regional collaboration. This can be done through any kind of bilateral or multilateral organization, for example, the SAARC and the SCO. These forums can be used especially for the refugee management framework. Now, the second important thing is enhancing the multilateral engagement. For this, India can advocate for UN funding to Afghanistan and even ask for assistance for refugee rehabilitation. And the third important thing is a holistic approach through which India can help through aid, skill development. We can provide for concession when it comes to education, and we can link development and foreign policy goals. So this will bring a holistic approach binding us to the particular country. Now the fourth important thing is human right advocacy. So any kind of offenses that hurt a larger population or even a single person should be monitored internationally, and there should be a inclusive peace building process that has to be taken place when it comes to Afghanistan. So these are the very important facts that you have to remember. So far we saw about the location of Afghanistan, then we saw about the bilateral ties between India and Pakistan, between India and Afghanistan. Then we saw about the India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan triangle. We saw about the challenges. Then we saw about the solutions. So with this, we came to the end of the news article discussion. If you like the video, hit like, do comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel. Now, thank you so much for listening.